Hi, welcome back to Everyday Behavior. Today we're talking about low frequency, high intensity behavior. So what exactly does that mean? Well, low frequency means it doesn't occur very often, so it's a rare behavior, but when it does occur, it's really intense or really severe. So maybe this is a child that has like a 1-hour tantrum, but it only happens every 6 months, or a child at school that maybe destroys an entire classroom, but again, it only happens like once a month. And when you're trying to assess this behavior or intervene on this behavior, sometimes it can be very difficult because there isn't a pattern of behavior. And so it's really hard to establish, like, what is the function of this behavior? What are the antecedents, or what caused this behavior to happen? So if you're in a school setting and you're supposed to be doing an FBA on a low frequency behavior, a behavior that doesn't occur very often, it's really hard to do that within your 90-day window. And if you're a parent, you're kind of on edge, wondering, is this going to happen again, or what's going to happen the next time, or where is it going to happen, or what's going to set it off. So there's a couple of things that we're going to talk about this month. We're going to talk about behavior chains. We're going to talk about a stimulus class and a response class. But the first thing that's important to know is, what are the 3 dimensions of behavior that we're evaluating? So the first dimension of behavior that we're evaluating is the frequency in which the behavior occurs. So is it occurring once a day, once a month, once every 6 months? How often is it happening? So frequency measures the number of times the behavior occurs in a given period of time. So your examples are 3 times a day, 4 times an hour, or maybe 1 aggressive episode a week, maybe a major property destruction like breaking the TV or a gaming system once a month or once every 6 months. That's your frequency. Higher frequency behaviors that occur more often, are easier to intervene on, and they're easier to assess because there are more opportunities to establish a pattern of behavior and to teach the child. So if you only have 1 opportunity every 6 months to learn that this is the consequence, well, then it takes multiple opportunities to figure that out. And so it can take years to figure it out, versus if we have 6 times a day to practice the consequence of a behavior, then we're able to make change much faster. The intensity is how the force in which the behavior occurs. And so force intensity is really hard to measure. So you may look at it on a scale of like 1 to 10. How intense is this behavior? Is this a 10 or is this a 1? You may also look at, how hard is the hitting? So maybe sometimes a child just lightly hits, and sometimes maybe they punch or hit hard enough to cause a bruise. So, what's the force behind the swing, basically? Maybe slapping that leaves a red mark, or pinching or biting, what's the intensity behind it? Yelling that can be heard in a neighboring room or next door or outside of the house, or maybe biting that leaves an impression. So what is the intensity behind whatever the behavior is, the force in which it occurs? And so intensity, when we're looking at tantrum behavior, maybe sometimes they throw things, like maybe sometimes they throw their controller and they throw it on the floor, but it's not intense enough to break it. But sometimes they pick up the gaming system and they throw the gaming system on the floor, or maybe they throw the remote at the TV and it breaks the TV. Maybe it's, how loud they're screaming, or how hard they're hitting whenever they're upset. That's intensity. And so typically we're able to kind of weather mild behaviors like whining or crying or stomping their feet, but we really tend to get a little more worked up over those more intense behaviors. Maybe the screams where you're like, oh my gosh, the neighbors are going to call DHS on us any minute. So what's the intensity of the behavior? Another dimension of behavior that we want to look at is the duration of the behavior. How long is the behavior occurring? So is it a tantrum that's lasting 5 minutes, or a tantrum that's lasting 60 minutes? Is it screaming that lasts 30 seconds, or is it like continuous screaming where it's going on and on and on throughout a period of time? So duration is how long the behavior lasts. So when we're looking at behaviors, it's harder to assess those low frequency, high intensity behaviors, the ones that don't occur very often, but when they do occur, they're pretty distressing and they tend to get everybody's attention. And those that last longer, because, we can kind of handle a tantrum that lasts 30 seconds or even 5 minutes, but when we have a tantrum that lasts 30 minutes, that's a little harder to intervene on. But it can be really hard to intervene on behaviors that don't occur as often, or there are fewer opportunities to learn. So that's what we're going to talk about in this month's series. But before we get to our next section and how we're going to apply this information, you really need to have a good understanding of frequency, intensity, and duration. Thank you very much for watching this brief little video here. Again, these videos and lessons are created in a partnership with the Oklahoma State Department of Education. And for more information, you can visit our website at everydaybehaviors.com. You can also find more information on Facebook, YouTube, or soon on our podcasts. Thank you. Have an excellent day.